Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we're here with this week's review. Dalton, what do we hit this week?
We're doing poetry again, but not the poetry we normally do. We're going way back.
Way back machine.
We are going to go to the bard himself, William Shakespeare.
Okay, which sonnet?
Sonnet 18. Because if you're going to start with one, you got to start with 18. So,
we will both read this.
True poetry fashion. This is the apparently how the masters do it. Excuse me.
Yes.
So,
very much so.
If I may.
Yes. Please do.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often in his gold complexion dimmed, every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. When in eternal lines to time thou growest, so long as men can breathe, our eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
He did it wrong.
I always do it wrong. Piss off! All right, lay it on me. Tell me how it's supposed to be done.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Look at that. So, this is old. Let's talk about Shakespeare, 1564 to 1616.
Yes.
So, this is some dated language, which I think a lot of people have issues with when they're first discovering poetry.
Yes.
So, that's something we're going to have to tackle a little bit. Let's do 3 good things and 3 bad things.
Yeah.
That's a good starting place. Give me some good things.
This is not impenetrable Englishese, which some of Shakespeare falls into. Obviously, this falls within the constraints of a sonnet, but above those constraints, the word choice gives it an amazing rhythm and cadence.
Okay.
This is more well-spoken than it is lovey-dovey, right? This is not just gushing.
Okay.
This is, how can we take something intelligent, make it witty, and translate it into something beautiful?
Oh, are those your 3?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I tone out when you talk. It's nice. This is the first poem that you probably memorized whether you knew it or not, for whatever case may be. I think Shakespeare is very quotable. Everybody knows a quote from Hamlet or a quote from Romeo and Juliet. But poetry-wise, this is one of the first ones that really sticks with you. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Even if it's just that line. This is the evocation of beauty through poetry, which I think is great. Some people are going to shy away from, but we'll talk. And in my opinion, in order to have beauty, to have love, to have everything described in this, there must be loss.
Okay.
We'll argue that.
Okay.
3 bad things.
I know he wrote a little bit of free verse, but I would like to see this poem in free verse. I wonder what he could have done without the constraints.
Shakespeare raps poetry.
Because the constraints are sort of show-offy, right?
They are.
Lines 5 through 8, while timeless, are not as good as the rest of the poem, I don't believe. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, ... And though it is not Englishese, I can still imagine the nomenclature and composition being rather dense to someone who is not prepared for it.
Every now and then when you, I have to interrupt with this, when you're reading constantly and you're not thinking, you have those moments of stupidity. I just had one.
What's that?
You, for some reason, you said sometimes too hot, the eye of heaven shines. Well, you stole that from Tolkien. That's the eye of Sauron. Oh, my brain hurts. This is dated language. I did mention that. Sometimes that is very hard to approach in a modern setting, is to go back and to read something very dated, especially if you're not used to that. So that might be off-putting to some, but I think you can get past it. Old poetry, beyond epic poems, is usually painfully short. As soon as you start to enjoy it and start to get it, it's over, unfortunately. This, I think, falls under the unfortunate thing that we always talk about poetry, is if you read this for your first time and you're not versed in poetry, you're just picking this up off the shelf, this seems like floral language. This is very sissy. It's not manly.
Okay.
And I think that is what we're trying to fight on the internet machine.
The perception of
poetry.
Yes.
So
what was your favorite line?
Now, I thought about this one a little bit, and I know you're going to disagree with me a very little bit. I think it's "But thy eternal summer shall not fade." That says a lot.
Oh, you're wrong.
I know.
You're wrong.
Carry on. What is the correct answer to your favorite line?
So long was this, and this gives life to thee. The last line.
Think so?
Yes. And we'll have it out later. We'll have it out.
Okay. So what do you want to start with on this?
Who is this poem written to?
That's a good question. Now, when you sit and read it, you immediately say, oh, it's to a woman.
Okay.
But was it?
Well, carry on. Go on.
Oh, I think it could be very ambiguous. Is that the right word?
Ambiguous?
Ambiguous. Yeah. I can't talk today. I told you my brain is
ambiguous.
Ambiguous.
Ambiguous?
You assume this is to a woman. This is a man writing a love poem to a woman. However, given Shakespeare's background, given the background of most men in the world of literature, this might not be to a woman.
How do you mean?
There could be some homosexual tones here.
You think?
Absolutely. This is Freddie Mercury. This is Big Daddy himself writing that beautiful ballad. And then everybody's like, oh, that's not about women? Oh, just maybe. But we don't know. We don't know for sure. That's the beautiful thing about this.
I don't know that this is about love in a sexual fashion.
You don't think so?
There is some scholarship suggesting that this was written to a son that he had that died.
Okay.
And let's look at this a little bit. Lines 1 and 2. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. This definitely reeks of love.
Yes.
Right? This definitely says that someone's in love.
There is some kind of passion behind this.
Lines 3 and 4. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date.
There's loss.
There's something being lost there. When you're talking about May, what time of the year are you talking about?
Late spring, early summer.
The spring is expiring and the hot part's coming.
Okay. And in this time period, summer and winter are harsh. Those are hard months to live in.
And summer's lease hath all too short a day. What would you be talking about when talking about that summer's gone too soon? Fall.
Okay.
What is fall?
Death and decay.
Okay. So 5 and 6. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. Now what is that? What's going on there?
I don't know. That one gets a little more trickier.
This is life turning sour for the person who survived. Okay. Is it not? The eye of heaven is too hot, and even then, the sun's too dim. Right?
Okay.
So 7 and 8. And every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. That is the struggle to cope with something that's out of your control.
Okay.
Is it not?
So you're saying this is a poem about the loss of something. Something, someone.
Yes, possibly.
So this is not a profession of love. This is an established love that has been lost.
I don't think it's a love that's just lost. Well, here.
One that is no more.
No more.
Okay.
For one reason or another. Lines 9 and 10. But thy eternal summer shall not fade. nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. That's saying, I will always remember.
Okay.
I will always remember you. And this does not seem in a melodramatic fashion. So we move on from there. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade. When in eternal lines to time thou growest. What's going on there? Absolutely nothing is better because or happy that you're gone. Not even death.
Time still goes on.
Yeah, but not even death is happy that he had to take you, right? So we've got this ending couplet. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. This is for you, and through my words you will live forever. Is this a humble brag? Right? So we've got...
Yeah, through these words you'll live forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have, despite the fact that you're dead, basically is what it feels like there.
Okay.
So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
Interesting.
Is there or is there not an overwhelming sense of death? That something is not gone, but dead when you read it in that fashion?
Normally, I would argue that you've been reading too much Dickinson again. However, I think you're right. I think that's a very good take on this poem. It's deep. You do have to pull, but I think it's correct.
I don't know if you're pulling so much as just simply rereading.
Rereading and looking at it in a different light.
Right.
That's very interesting.
And how... Damn it. How good is that? That you read this the first time, you're like, hey, baby, let me read this to you. And under everything, you're reading a woman a poem about death.
How many men have bed women, or men bed men, women bed women, whatever, by reading them a poem about someone's dead son? You couldn't get away with that anymore. So this is the bard at work.
Yes.
Now, can we talk just a moment about Shakespeare himself? I think that's very important. Because most people think Shakespeare, oh, it's Romeo and Juliet. He's a great guy. He did good things. There is so much more to that. He is the master for many reasons. First and foremost, this man is the master because this is the guy who came out and he wrote, directed, produced the movie Deadpool. And then a month later slaps you in the face with this, a beautiful poem.
In today's standards, he wrote, directed, and produced Deadpool. The very next week, he released a rap album.
That was flawless.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
okay. To actually put it in today's terms, because this is so hard to think about.
It is.
Imagine Eminem making the highest grossing movie of the year.
Okay.
That's what this is. That is Eminem made Civil War the movie, right?
And this isn't just a fluke. He time and time does this again.
Yeah.
It's everything, and that's what he's remembered for as being the great one. Because everything he did was gold. Gold. Now, there is a bit of debate on who he actually was. When I was in college, very close to a professor, Don Lilly, who was an adamant believer, and there's a large amount of people who believe this, that Shakespeare was not a person. Shakespeare was actually a former playwright, Christopher Marlowe, writing under a different name. Now, the evidence for that is, before Shakespeare, the man of the times was Christopher Marlowe, who wrote nothing but beautiful poetry and nothing but beautiful plays. You get the two greatest playwrights in history literally living the same lifespan. Because as soon as Marlowe fades off into obscurity, you get Shakespeare. It's just almost unheard of. So there's a lot of argument of, could Marlowe be Shakespeare? I just think that's a little interesting tidbit, especially for people who are not as versed in Shakespeare.
And there's a few things that go to this theory that Shakespeare was not a real person.
Yes.
One of the more compelling ones for me, if I'm understanding this correctly, is what I have right here is the sonnets and other love poems. If I'm understanding this correctly, the sonnets dropped mid-career for Shakespeare.
Okay.
And it was the first anyone had ever heard of Shakespeare writing poetry and the last anyone heard of Shakespeare writing poetry.
Yes.
And they just happened to be, 129, something like that?
A lot of them.
Greatest sonnets of all time.
The man came out of obscurity and said, here you go.
Right.
And
here you go, the annals of history.
Yeah, in addition to this, he's like, here, why don't you have a handful of plays that will be never replicated?
Right.
There's so much debate. And it's not just, Christopher Marlowe. Francis Bacon has been attributed to Shakespeare. There's no legitimate, verified, agreed-upon portrait of Shakespeare, a man who was so important in his times.
Right. Also, the number of references, the number of extra literary references in Shakespeare outdoes basically anyone, right? I mean, he's referencing Roman stuff, he's referencing Greek stuff, he's referencing everything in his plays, but there is no sign that he ever had a library.
Yes.
Nothing, no book from Shakespeare was ever left to anyone.
No formal education and upbringing, just nothing. A man out of obscurity is the greatest writer of all time.
Right.
Christopher Marlowe, when he disappeared, he was killed over a bar tab. Right. It's just a ridiculous premise. So there's so many conspiracy theories to this.
Just for the reference, I am of the opinion that Shakespeare was a real person.
I think so as well. I do. But I just had to plug that as a little interesting note, maybe to get people a little more interested in Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's always worth mentioning when talking about Shakespeare, I think.
And if you are a theater person, how dare you not read Shakespeare? How dare, sir and or madam? But anyway, this poem, let's talk about it a little bit more. What more can we say about it? Why is your favorite line your favorite line? The final line.
For me, what that does is it harkens back to humanism.
Okay.
Now, in addition to all the things that we've said about Shakespeare, if he was a real person, which I very much believe he was, one of the things that he struggled with was religion.
Yes.
And this was during the time where the official religion of England flipped from his religion, so any of the practices that he had to then do underground, and this is where a lot of the undertones of homosexuality from his work seem to spring from, because leading a secret life is something that a lot of homosexuals have to do, right?
We're forced to do, especially.
We're forced to do then, but now you're not going to be stoned to death for it in the United States anyway. But you'll lose your life, right? The life that you knew will not be the life that you have.
And that's why coming out was such a big thing. And,
right. And so for me, that last line, look, there's been a lot of conversation that the first large group of Jews, or group of atheists in the modern world, were the Jews after World War II. That so many of them lost their religion but did not want to lose their tradition because of the miserable things that happened. And in the Jewish tradition, there's no idea of heaven.
Okay.
But the afterlife is there. And there's the references to resurrection at a certain point. But this first great group of essentially atheists sort of retrofit their religion with the idea that the way you live on, the way that you reach heaven and live forever, is that you pass on some little nugget of you to someone else. And that person passes it on to their son and daughter, and that son and daughter pass it on to the next generation.
And a portion of you lives on.
Right, a little Adrianism will live on through Dalton.
Terrifying thought.
Into Dalton, little salty Dalty Jr.
Oh my.
And that's how you live forever. And that last line is not saying, hey baby, I'll see you in heaven. It's saying you have changed me.
Okay.
And through you changing me, I have changed this page. And this page that I have changed will change a future generation.
I think that was a very interesting point to bring up, how he had to go underground, essentially, to write this. At this point in time, the poets, the writers, the bards were not the writers and the actors and the musicians and the artists we get now, who are revered and very famous. Yeah, they're revered, yeah, they're famous, but they're miscreants. Yeah. These are not royalty, they're beneath us, they do this for our pleasure.
Not only that, but they are, if you read historically, people who are constantly poking.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
At the risk of their own life.
Oh, yes, because if you said something wrong at this point in time
about
and printed it, you were dead. But they do say things like that, and they get away with it. And if you do want to hearken this as to a humanistic approach to living, as an atheist approach to prolonged life, or eternal life, that's something that has to be so subtle that the normal reader will not get, that the educated reader will not get.
And that someone who does get it, it's hidden well enough that you can talk them out of it.
It's that hidden nod. It's the nod of the hat that no one sees.
Is that why you wore the hat?
It's exactly why I wore the hat. What else can we say? Do you have anything else you really wanted to get out of just off your chest about Sonnet 18? This is a famous one.
I would like to have more conversation about it. So do you have any points you would like to bring up?
I want to talk a little bit about but thy eternal summer shall not fade. Why I picked that one? For some reason, when I get into poetry, and I did this with the Red Wheelbarrow, which I should have a video on eventually, the concept of scene painting in time always seems to get me. That is the first instance. I mean, you have death and you have heaven, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. That is my first existence of eternal life. It's that captured moment, that perfect magic summer that we'll always have. We'll always have Paris. It's that romantic ideal of that perfect moment in time that lives on within you. If I'm getting anywhere.
Yes, but what is summer?
That is a season.
It's hot.
Okay.
Right? It's not particularly comfortable, but it's passion, right?
It is passion.
It is not love in the sense of, I'm really comfortable with you.
And it seems like summer has always been a romantic notion, though.
But in poetry, all seasons have.
Yes, but it just seems like that the passion and the love of an unbridled summer. That's that romantic ideal. That's what I associate a summer with. And that seems to be a trope of poetry and of literature, is the passionate, romantic summer fling that person will always carry with them. They will always keep within the tomes of their heart. But that's what they have. They just have the memory of that summer.
But even in that, there is an expiration date. You mentioned a summer fling.
It is a
Flings
fling.
end.
They do end, but it's an eternal summer that shall not fade. It's a memory that he will have. And we can go both ways with this. If we want to go death, we could even go as far to say that the eternal summer shall not fade. Good way or bad. The prolonged summer where it's hot and it's painful. Or it's the summer that they had. The last moments with that person.
But why do they have to be separate?
They could be the same.
The last intense moments you have with someone.
And that's why it's going to be
feverish.
eternal. And that's why it will not fade. Because that will stick forever with you.
Also, pointing to a reading of childhood, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Right?
Okay.
Darling buds of May. That points to something that is young, that is nascent.
Yes.
This does not point to a grown lover. This points to something more precious than that.
Young innocence, the birth of a new child.
And every fair from fair sometime declines.
And I do think it's interesting you brought up there is scholarship saying that this is about a son who passed. Because once you read it that way, you could definitely see it.
I think once you read it that way, it's almost impossible to go back. It's almost impossible to go back.
And naturally, you didn't prepare me for that at all. You just said, read, give me an answer.
Dalton, in all fairness, we've talked about Shakespeare 2 or 3 times on the channel.
Yes.
And I have mentioned this poem and this interpretation every time.
Have you really?
Yes.
Oh, I don't listen when you talk.
I know.
However, I will say this. It is the summer months. We have a lot of viewers who are either going to A, be going off to college for the first time, or 2, be going back to high school for a literature class. I did
A
that.
or 2. A2 Brute.
You're going to read this.
Did you catch that?
Yes, I did.
That was pretty clever, I think.
You're going to read this.
Yeah.
I don't care where you're going to school, what you're going to school for. You will come across Sonnet 18. Easy as that.
And if your professor asks you what it's about, say death and surprise them.
Look at that. Look at that. And then link this channel and get us fired from the jobs that we created for us. What would you rate Sonnet 18?
I think it's impossible not to give this one at least a 95. I gave it a 95. Darling Buds of May out of 100.
I will say out of reverence, I'd give it 92.
Okay.
92. It's a beautiful poem. It is.
Even with the depth involved, you don't think you can give it
With
above
the
92?
depth involved, I think 92 is high for me. I always am lower than you, except when we did On the Road. That was pain and suffering.
Yeah.
But I think 92 is a fair number for this.
Okay, so give us a recommendation.
I'm going to play...
Based on Sonnet 18.
I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
If you enjoyed Sonnet 18 and you enjoyed Shakespeare, you need to read Marlowe. And you need to see the eerie similarities between them. Look at these dates. Shakespeare, 1564 to 1616. Marlowe, on the next page, 1564 to 1593. The two greatest authors of all time were born side by side.
I would not call Christopher Marlowe the greatest author of all time.
Before Shakespeare came out and just blew the world away, Marlowe was the guy.
Okay.
Hand over fist.
I would suggest the trench poets, namely Isaac Rosenberg, Williford Owen, and Siegfried Sassoon, because if you liked Sonnet 18, you very much like the forms of poetry. You very much like constraint in verse.
Okay.
The trench poets were so miraculous in taking form and pissing on it, tearing it apart, and saying, "Oh, you think this is beautiful?
Yes.
You think that sonnets are about love? Let me give you the glory of women."
But there is such beauty in trench poetry.
Yes.
Such beauty.
Returning, we hear the larks.
So that is a good choice, a fine choice. Make sure you comment down below and let us know what you think about Sonnet 18.
What's your favorite sonnet?
What's your favorite piece from Shakespeare? Who's actually heard of Dr. Faustus? And make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're here all the time talking about things that make you uncomfortable.